I want to think with you just for some quick thoughts here. And I want to give you just some quick images of travel that have just from my recent past. And hopefully these are some images you can identify with. And I suspect you will have stories very similar to these. But the first one, if we could just throw up an image. There we are. Yes, we recognize this lady. Mona Lisa, right? In the Louvre. How many of you been to the Louvre? Right. Wow, this is you know my story already. That's right, yeah. So what you don't see in this picture is what? You don't see how small it is, that's right. It's very small. It's like 1.5 feet by 2 feet. The other thing you don't see is why it's blurry. Do you know why it's blurry? Some of you all know why it's blurry. There are 10,000 people in this room. And they are all clamoring to try to get as close as they can to this picture. Completely ignorant of everyone around them. And so I had found my way. I was probably 50 feet away, maybe 30 feet away if I got that close. And I just simply held up my hand and put it on hold so that it just took hundreds of pictures. And I hoped one would actually just be, you know, that's the clearest picture I could get of Mona Lisa from where I was. Just a crowd, just packed. And then to make my way out, pushing, shoving, and just trying to inch my way out politely. People were sitting on each other's backs. It was just amazing. The next one. Here's another one. This thing is actually about 5 feet or so off the floor. You all recognize this. I believe this is, I want to say this is Zeus, but I may be wrong. I did not take a look at it. But I was caught by the number, by just a beautiful statue. But why you don't see the floor is because there's a line of people, mostly girls, but there's people, there's some guys too. They're all lined up to lay down in that position and have their picture taken with it. And my wife was saying, you should have taken a picture of that. It's like, that's not what I wanted, but I didn't know I was going to be preaching on this. I would have if I realized I needed the illustration. But yes, this is the Louvre, and everywhere we went, selfies were being taken right and left, and every possible connection, and just a selfie here and there. And people were literally lining up to be next to the statue, so I had to wait a while to at least get a clear shot. And then the next one. Now, this is Rothenburg in Germany. This was on the same trip. This was last summer. And Rothenburg is the oldest existing active castle city in Germany. And it's just a walled city within the city of Rothenburg. And so there's still car traffic here and there, but it's mostly pedestrian traffic during the nighttime, and then during the daytime, usually only business things get through. Now, you'll see this crowd. This is the square, and you'll see the crowd is looking away. The reason why is if you'll look, there's a gentleman off to the left, and again, I didn't find the picture that I took of the actual singer. My wife and I were in this building on the left. This was an old, like a prison, and in the ground floor underneath was a dungeon. And it had 2 levels of dungeons. And my wife and I are down in the deepest level of dungeon when all of a sudden I hear someone singing an aria from La Traviata. And I'm thinking, well, the big Catholic church is on the other side. Maybe they're practicing for a concert. But then I hear an accordion and a clarinet and an aria being sung, La Traviata. And I thought, well, that's the strangest thing. But it rang out above all the noise. I just heard these tones. Of course, my grandmother was an opera singer. So I said, we got to go see this. So we came out, and you can't see where we came out, but just to the left of that gentleman that you see in the white shirt. And there, standing across the street, there's a big construction site where they're completely remodeling the building across from the one on the left. There is a young woman who's about 23, and she's dressed in jeans and a T-shirt, and she's singing the most gorgeous aria in a coloratura soprano with a klezmer band accompanying her. And it's the oddest combination, but it sounds absolutely gorgeous. And there's only 6 of us paying attention. I took a picture of this crowd because I couldn't believe nobody was turning around to see it. And as she was in the midst of this moving, amazing piece, this little minivan starts to back up with the little beeping sound because it's backing up into her. So she continues to sing as she moves to the left. And it just backs up, and she kind of shakes her head, and then she just keeps on singing. And there's this chaos happening around her, but it's only a handful of people that seem to really notice it. It's as if everyone else was waiting for what's supposed to happen. So they're headed towards what next thing is happening in the courtyard, but they're missing what's happening at that moment. Saw this all over the place traveling. It was really funny. It was sad and funny. I don't know what the next picture is, but let's see. Oh, yes, this was great. This is actually not the woman. This happened yesterday. I was driving, my wife and I stayed in Graham, Texas. That's where my daughter-in-law's mother lives, outside of Graham, Texas. We're staying out on top of the levee looking out over the Brazos River, this wonderful house that overlooks. It's just gorgeous. And we go into Graham and have a lovely breakfast and visit with some of the folks and walk out, and this girl comes out of a hairstyle shop right across the street. We had moved our car when she first pulled in so that there was room for her to get in. And then we went in and she pulled in behind us. But then she came out as we were getting out of the restaurant and she was wearing this T-shirt. And I wanted to take a picture of her, but I just thought that wouldn't be appropriate. I thought I was going to get in trouble for that. But I thought, how do you greet somebody with that? Next picture. And then this is the last scene I wanted to just bring to you. I saw this 3 days ago at a wonderful little coffee shop here on Magnolia Street called Brewed Coffee. Y'all ever been to Brewed? You might not have noticed this. It's the mirror sitting right there behind the counter. It says, serve people, bless the city, impact the world. I thought, really? You're a coffee shop. How amazing is that? So I took a picture of it. You should go see it. It's just amazing. I told the owners, of course, weren't there, but I told the manager of the store, I said, this is such a wonderful thing to see. And she said, well, it's kind of the motto we have here. We all make a difference. All of these are kind of images that I experience all the time, and I suspect that you have these kinds of experiences as well. Maybe you don't notice them as often. I sort of make it a point to always just try to notice these things. It's amazing. Life seems to always present itself with its paradoxes and with its moments of divine revelation or insight. But one of the things that I've discovered in traveling is that when you travel, it's so easy to get caught up in the purpose of the travel to forget the real purpose of the travel. So I'll explain a little bit. You get caught up in a business trip, you got to pack everything that's due on the trip that you have to take with yourself, the laptop, the notes, the files, whatever else, the clothes you're going to need for that occasion. What else do you put in a bag when you take a trip? Well, if you're on a business trip, maybe you want to look good. So you take clothing that you hope will make you look good or appear as professional as possible. If you're on a vacation, maybe you pack because you want to look good or you want to feel comfortable. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we pack and about the stress of what has to happen that we forget what's happening around us. On my trip back from Ireland earlier last year, I had the great luck of sitting in the middle section of a DC, well, it wasn't a DC-10, but it was a 777, so I had the 5 seats in the middle, 3 on either side, and I was sitting smack dab in the middle of the 5 seats. And on the right side of me was a woman with her child, small crying baby. On the left side was a family from India, and the man was sick. I mean, nauseous sick. And so the man had his wife, who was on the other side, who was very pregnant, so he actually looked at me and said, in his broken English, I am going to have to exit that way. So I looked at the woman next to me and I said, I wonder if it'd be all right to sit over there. And she was like, no, I don't want to sit over on that side because the man was sick. And so I stayed in the middle. And the whole time I was just overwrought with this anxiety that I was stuck between these crying children and a flight that's going to last only 9.5 hours, and then a man who's going to have to get up and down from the chair probably every 20 to 30 minutes. And it was like that for almost the first hour or so of the trip. And I didn't know exactly what to do. I tried to put my headphones in. I tried to ignore the reality around me until I just started to ask him some questions. Just engage in the conversation. And it was kind of funny because what ended up taking place was that most of the conversation actually happened back beside the bathroom. Because after we got started and I found out that his family was coming to America for the first time ever, that he had family that was living here, and that his family had arranged here in the States to get him a job, and so he was bringing his wife and his child, and she's got pregnant with another child. And so he was excited. This was a whole new future for him. And the conversation went on for hours. And it started at the seats, but it ended up mostly back by the bathrooms. And he began to feel better after a while. But I never would have experienced that. I truly would have missed out on the kind of wonder and joy and adventure that lay ahead of him. And being a part of that affirmation for him. It seems like a lot of times we have things that are packed in our bags that don't need to be there. And I'm just going to highlight a few of them because our time is tight, and I want to be mindful of that, and I want to get to this whole idea of why salt is so important. But I think one of the things we have to be careful is that we forget who we are. And that's why we get caught in these situations. Whether it's down the road to the cafe, or whether it's around the world on a vacation, or whether it's on a business trip. And incidentally, did you know that vacation and vocation come from the same root words? Isn't that interesting? We'll get back to that. So I want to think with you about salt, because I think it's who we are. As Sharm had said in her prayer, we are salt. We are light. We don't always remember it. That's the problem. In the verse, it's amazing to me, Jesus says, you are the salt. He doesn't say, you become the salt, you be the salt, you try to be the salt, don't forget and do some more salt-like things. He says, you are the salt of the earth. Just metaphorically think with me. Yeah. He says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, do you know what salt is? Salt is just a simple compound, sodium chloride. It's one of the most simple, stable compounds around. Did you know that, in fact, salt cannot lose its saltiness? Did you know that? We think, oh, sure, yeah, I've got some salt that does. Well, if it's got additives, that may change the flavor of it. But most often, when salt loses its saltiness, is that it loses its appearance of saltiness because things are done to it. Or it's perhaps diluted, or perhaps you add ingredients to what you're cooking to dilute the flavor of the salt. But salt itself cannot be broken down, losing its flavor. It can't lose its substance. It's the most basic of compounds. You are salt. You can't lose it. But think of all the ways we try to. Think of all the ways we try to that we forget who we are, or that we end up covering up who we are. When I think about the salt that we end up covering up in our traveling, what I think about is why we pack certain things. We pack certain things because of ego. We pack certain things because we get caught up in anxieties about how we will appear or how we will look, and not so much about the wonder or the excitement we'll find. But if we thought instead about what really is our flavor, what really is the essence of who we are, what really is that which inspires us, that's our salt. That is the divine nature of God, who is a part of us, and we are a part of God, and move and live and have our being in that nature, and we are that for one another. But what is it? What is that essence that's truly, authentically your inspiration and how you inspire others? That's sometimes what I think we forget to put in the bag. I think we get caught up in all the things that are the appearance of flavor. But we forget to put in the essence of who we really are and what we give to one another. So let me ask you these questions before you think about your next packing trip. Take a look at what's in the bag. And then take things out and ask yourself, why is this in here? I suppose before you can do that, you have to remember why you are salt. What it is about you that is salt? What is it about you that is inspiring? What about you is your essence that moves others? And again, you may have to spend some time thinking about this. I don't know what it was, the one thing that you said you would necessarily bring on a trip. I said, in my thinking, it's always going to be openness. It's not always going to be there. But ultimately, I hope it breaks through to always be open to just whatever's going to happen and whatever might be there for me to respond to, but always open. Someone told me once they brought wonder. Similar thing. Some told me they brought curiosity, so they were going to explore everything. Is compassion one of those things that's truly your salt? Is that how you flavor the life of others? Don't forget to pack that. I think we get caught up in those other things that we put in there. We have to take those things out in order to find room. You know the old Zen story about the student who was with his monk, and his monk was serving him tea. He had his cup out there. It was already a quarter full. The monk started pouring in more tea until it was overflowing. And the student looked up and said, "Master, I've got enough." He said, you're filling it up. Why would you do that? He said, "Because your mind is just like this cup." He said, "There's no room for me to fill anything because it's already overfull. Go and empty it first, and then we'll talk about how you fill." Sometimes we need to take a look, I think, at who we are and why we're the way we are when we travel. Now I'll close with these thoughts. If you're traveling because you're thinking you're going to find some adventures, and you're looking for excitement, and you're looking for thrill because life has generally kind of been boring or mundane or routine for you, then that's great. You'll probably find those. I bet when you get back, it's still going to be routine for you. I think that's going to be true for most of us. If we go because we're one of those people who love to go places so that we can take our selfies and so that we can look around, and when we get back and people talk about having been to Washington, we can chime right in and go, yeah, I was at Washington. Oh, yes, the Smithsonian, I was there. That was amazing. So that we can chime in and feel like we belong or are connected for some distant sort of superficial reason. We're still going to miss out on the depth of what every moment has to offer. Until we can go because we are salt, because we are offered to one another, until we can go with an openness to give of ourselves in every trip, in every travel, whether it's to the cafe or whether it's around the world or whether it's a business trip, until we can be open and bring what is truly authentically us to the moment, then I think basically we come back without really having changed. The best way, I'm going to just read this because I wrote this down and I thought it was not so bad. The best way to experience life, to connect with the kingdom of God every day, everywhere, to experience and recognize the Christ who is in each other, in those we meet, no matter where they're from or what part of the world, the divine God is present in all of us. Christ is revealed in all of us. Until we begin to recognize that and unpack those bags before us that are more about us. I have to say this really quickly because it's a random thought, but I just thought of it. When I do drum circles, if you've ever been in a drum circle, it never works the minute you start thinking about your drum. If you've ever been in a drum circle, it never works. I did drum circles all summer long for 15 years with kids and with adults. It never works. The minute you look at your drum, it falls out of rhythm. It's only when you pay attention to everyone else around you that everything is perfect rhythm. It's only when you're less self-conscious about yourself that things come into right relationship one with another. And unless we begin to recognize those parts of ourselves that we pack in our bags that are really more about us than about getting out of the way, then we will not experience the kingdom of God, and it will be very difficult for us to indeed be light of the world. But when we pack our flavor, what is most authentically our connection with God, when we come into connection with that and offer that to one another, when that is in the bag and whatever we pack in there helps to illuminate that, whether it be a journal, whether it be a camera that's going to capture moments where I am offering to others, whatever we pack in there, if it connects with that authentic relationship with one another that we have in God, then when we do that, I think it brings us back to a place where we have not only flavored our own lives a little bit, but I think we might actually leave wherever we traveled with a gift as well. Amen.